Hello! Over the past 2 videos I've painted out all of the Daniel Smith Triad sets in my Bectober Sketchbook. Well, I have 5 more themed sets, these Grabie Watercolors that they sent me ages ago. I'm finally getting around to painting with these. They also sent me some jumbo glitter gel pens, and of course I have to have some sparkle in my book. I'm so excited for these. There's a lot to do again today. Let's get into it! So earlier in the year, Grabie sent me out a gift box and these watercolours were in it. It's that big green box and I made a video on it. If you haven't seen it, I'll link it at the end of this one, where I just basically opened everything. And I did use some of the supplies, but I didn't get around to these watercolours because there's a lot in here. This is such a cute set though. There are 5 different tins. I did swatch out the first ones. These are the essentials. There are 12 colours in each tin, and each tin has a different theme, and there are no repeating colours. Every single tin has a different colour in it, and with all the tins together, that's 60 total colours, so it's pretty good. And you can buy this box on their website. I'll link everything in the description below so you can find them. They didn't actually send these to me to film, but I just knew I had to do them because they're so cute. And it ended up that they worked out well for Bectober because of all the themed paintings I've done so far. The essential theme is pretty much a standard watercolour palette. The next one is Floral, and I'll just open one up so you can see what they looked like when they were new. Extruded dry half pans in a somewhat dubious colour order that pretty much went along all of the sets. I filmed the swatching of these cards months ago, so in the interest of making this video just a bit shorter, I'm just going to give a really quick rundown of them and then swatch everything again in my sketchbook. After that little tease, here is the floral set all painted out, if I can pick it up. I didn't even wait for these to dry, but you can see what I mean about a random colour order. The next theme here is Forest, a much more neutral colour palette. I particularly love that bright blue sky though. The next set is Landscape with a surprisingly bright colour palette. I actually really like it, and I was pointing out that there is dark turquoise but also regular turquoise, which is what I mean about some colours being similar but not quite the same. And last up is Autumn, which is a repeat theme for my book because I also had the Autumn Daniel Smith Triad. But now I have 12 colours and I've timed this perfectly for Northern Hemisphere autumn, so I think that's going to work out well, although I will point out that it is spring here. Here are all the palettes, but just before I swatch them again, here are the Grabie Jumbo Glitter Gel Pens with 800% more ink than a regular size gel pen. I was so excited to get these because I love glitter pens. This is a set of 18 colours. I think there's also a 12 set. Just rummaging through my earlier footage, and yes, I did pull a pen out to show on camera. They're a nice design and they work like any other gel pen, but they have a much thicker barrel and therefore a larger ink cartridge, which is fantastic because I go through gel pens really quickly, and when you're colouring something in, it just runs out so fast. I found a standard size gel pen to compare, and you can see that the barrel is a lot slimmer, whereas the Grabie one is much chunkier, and I don't know if it is 8 times the amount of ink. It's really hard to tell, but I've been using them a while and I can say that it is taking them much longer to run out, that's for sure. But skipping forward a few months to Bectober now, I'd worked my way through more than half the book at this point, but from my calculations, I figured I had one spare page where I could swatch all of these watercolours and the jumbo glitter gel pens, so let's get swatching! I'll swatch these out pretty quickly because I really want to focus on the paintings, and I have, I think, 6 of them to talk about after this lot. Oh my goodness, these videos are so long. But there was a lot to cover and I wanted to make sure I talked about everything. So this first palette, the Essentials, is pretty much a standard watercolour palette. It has split primaries, a green, a purple, a couple of brownie colours, a black and a white. So nothing particularly out of the ordinary here, except for that sap green being annoyingly out of place, but I wasn't about to prize them all out and try and move them around. Then we start to get into slightly more unusual palettes. This first one is Floral, and it does have quite a wide variety of colours. I really like that the greens are fairly neutral and are more realistic for foliage rather than being bright greens. There's also a lot of different colours for flowers, and overall I think it's a really pretty palette. Next up is Autumn, and I think of all of them, this is probably the most neutral palette in that a lot of the colours, except for Maya Blue, are quite muted, and there's nothing too super bright in this particular one. Once again, the colours are all over the place, and I think that's my biggest gripe with these sets. It's just that the colours aren't in a proper order, or something that I would have liked. There's a lot of browns in the autumn set too, I should mention, plus a pretty nice indigo. The forest set is quite a limited palette, maybe the most limited of the 5. It tends towards the greens and blues, and then there's also a few brown colours in there. The paints themselves are pretty decent. They're definitely not professional grade, and I did find I struggled a bit re-wetting them. They worked much better if I dropped a bit of water on the pans before I used them and let it sit there for a couple of minutes. Last one up here is Landscape, and this ended up being quite an eclectic colour palette. Like, it starts off fairly normal, but then it has these really bright pinks and reds in there, and a few other ones which kind of don't make me think of landscapes automatically, but that just means I'm going to have to think outside of the box. Now for the glitter pens, and these are such a pleasure to use. The ink flows out really nicely, and it's a little bit hard to see on camera, but the glitter does show up quite significantly on the paper. Now, I did find that some pens tend to be more glittery than others, and a couple were not quite so much, or the glitter just doesn't mix into them as well as it does with some of the other colours. But overall, these are really high quality glitter pens, and I do love them. I've actually been using these a lot in my colouring books, but it's nice today to actually swatch them out in these squares and really see the colours shine on this white paper. And from a few experiments I did, they actually show up better on white paper than they do on black. They do tend to be quite transparent, and you just see more of a subtle glitter on the black. So I'm just going to stick with the white paper, which is how I tend to use them anyway, or layering over the top of watercolours or other plain pens. The fact that there are 18 colours in this set makes me really happy because there's quite a range. It would be fun if they included a black glitter pen, though I don't know if that's possible. But anyway, here are all the dried swatches in all of their different sets. There's plenty of colours here, all 60 of them. Now, as I said, they're not professional quality, but they're still pretty decent, and they don't have any pigment numbers or anything like that, so we'll just take them for what they are. A fun little set of 5 colour palettes, which are definitely fun to work with in a sketchbook. And now down to the jumbo glitter gel pens, and I'll try and get that glitter showing in the light. They really are beautiful. I'd maybe replace one of the blues with a black, but otherwise it's a pretty well-rounded set, and there's lots of colours to choose from in there. And now it's time to get on to the paintings, yay! And first up is the Essentials set. Now, I'm just doing single page paintings today rather than a full page spread because I don't have enough pages left in the book, but there's definitely enough for another 5 paintings. Now, I was trying to think, what on earth am I going to do for essentials? So I've interpreted this as, what's an essential kind of painting for me? And that would be a sunset or a galaxy, but the colours definitely lend themselves more towards a sunset, so that's what I went for. It's inspired by this beautiful photo that I found in the Facebook free reference photos for artists group, and I'm just making a bit of it up as well. I ended up using all of the colours in this particular painting, including the white, which wasn't that great, but it added a little bit of depth and interest into it. It's looking a right old mess at the moment, but I did manage to fix this up quite a lot as I went on, just layering the colours and trying to blend them together. They definitely don't run as well on paper as professional watercolours generally do, but they held up pretty well, and you can see the colours are really vibrant. They definitely worked better once I'd let the water sit on them for quite a while, and I wasn't seeing any nasty fillers or chalkiness on the paper. So even though they're not professional, they work perfectly well, and I was quite happy with them. This is 100% cotton watercolour paper, and of course the paper tends to be far more important than the paints themselves. I'm just giving a little bit of a horizon there, and painting in some of the green because that's the only colour I hadn't used. I'm painting in some little reeds just to give the foreground a little bit more interest. Making this up, I wasn't using any reference at this point. And then I was just adding some finishing touches, just making that green stand out a bit more, adding in another reed to balance it out, a little bit more brown down there, and making those reeds a bit darker on one side, and lastly dropping in some white watercolour for a subtle highlight. Much more subtle than the white pen, but I figured it would be okay. Writing a label, and here is the finished painting for Essential. It's super bright and colourful. taking a closer look, I can definitely tell that they're not professional paints, just the way that they texture on the paper, and it's more of a gouache-like consistency rather than full watercolour because of the fillers I'm guessing that are in the paints. Nitpicking aside, I really like the palette. Let's move on to Floral. I have an absolute ton of flower photos and I just couldn't pick what to do, so I'm taking inspiration from my Hemi gouache pad. I'd painted these whimsical tulips with gouache, and I even used the glitter pens as well on this, so I thought I might recreate something like this in my sketchbook with the watercolours. And this is just an imagination painting. I didn't even bother drawing anything, I'm just going straight in with the paints, hoping I can make some flower shapes and then turn them into tulips as I go. I'd paint the tulips with one colour and then I'd drop in a second colour just to break it up a little bit. The other challenge I'd given myself with these paintings was to use all of the colours in each palette. 12 colours this time instead of 3 like I had with the previous videos and the triads. And of course I was able to get a lot more colour variety with these paintings because there are far more mixes to be made as well. I found I was also able to loosen up and make up pictures rather than following from a reference so much. I really needed the references for the triads, but having 12 colours at my disposal meant I was a little bit more comfortable again and I was able to just let loose with some of these paintings, and I felt like whimsical flowers would be more fun than painting from one of my many thousand reference photos. These are not meant to be realistic, I was just painting tulips from memory and dropping in various greens for the stems and leaves, giving them a multicolour mottled effect which I actually really like. And this was the only way really to use all of the greens, just put them in the leaves and stems like this. I really enjoyed this loose painting and it was quite quick to do once I got going. There was one brown colour that I didn't really know what to do with, so I'm just painting in some browner grass with it and then mixing it in with the green. I actually think it looks pretty good. And just to finish the background, because I really didn't want to paint the entire thing and lose the focal point of the flowers, I'm just adding in all of the colours with little paint strokes, although now I'm looking at it, it does kind of take away from the flowers a bit, but I just love how multicoloured this is, and I really wanted to use some of those glitter pens today, so here you can see I'm drawing directly over the top of the watercolour with no issue whatsoever, and just outlining them a little bit, giving them a subtle amount of glitter. I tried not to go overboard with the glitter pens, because it's very easy to colour in too much with them and then I lose all of the watercolour underneath, so just a few little lines to outline the petals really, and of course this is very stylised. Then I wanted to add some of the green glitter pen to the stems and leaves as well, outlining everything, just making them stand out a little bit more from each other and the background, but particularly for the overlapping parts. This kind of painting is definitely one of my go-tos when I'm not really sure what else to paint. I just want something bright and cheerful. They're super easy to paint and it's really fun just drawing in the details with pretty pens, and of course a little bit of white gel pen just to add in those last little highlights and make everything stand out a bit more. I had so much fun with this particular painting, it was a good time. No pressure to go off reference photos, just making it up and letting it be what it is. Nothing too serious, just some whimsical flowers, and I really like how this turned out. This is my nod to Australian spring. I'll just give you a closer look so you can see some of the glitter pen detail as well, because it's hard to show under the studio lights unless I flip the book a little bit. Hopefully you can see some of the sparkle, and I think it outlined the flowers really nicely without going for harsh black lines this time. And now off to the Northern Hemisphere we go with autumn. Now this is the second time that autumn is featuring in this book, and in my previous video I mentioned that I didn't even think to paint a pumpkin or something like that, so that's exactly what I'm doing for this one. I used this reference photo from Pixabay to get the pumpkin line drawing in, and I'm actually drawing something in this book from scratch rather than prepping it beforehand. I'm going to completely change the colour scheme of this though, so once I had finished drawing it I actually moved the reference photo away so I couldn't see it, and the rest of it I'm making up entirely using all 12 colours from the palette. I didn't want the colours in the reference photo to throw me off, so I just went in making it up as I went along, dropping in all sorts of colours here, mostly oranges, reds, yellows, browns, which feature heavily in this palette, but there's also a light blue, which I thought would add a little bit of interest, and you can kind of imagine the light reflecting off it in that bluish colour, a little bit of green as well, and then just letting the colours mix in with each other to make their own colours. This was so much fun to do as well, and I was just really letting go, not getting bogged down with this colour needs to be looking like this, just letting watercolours do what they do, which is flow over paper into each other, and hopefully you end up with something that looks interesting at the end, which I think this pumpkin does look pretty cool. I really wanted to paint the background as well, but firstly I'm painting the log of wood that it's sitting on, and my colours are completely different to the photo once again. I'll fix that up a bit later. Now to go into the background, adding water and then dropping in two different kinds of blues, the lighter blue and this darker indigo, because I really wanted to use the indigo somewhere on its own rather than it mixing too much into the pumpkin. It's a two-tone background, lighter at the top and blending into darker as it moves down, and then I'm just adding in a little bit more shadow detail because I'd lost some of the detail in that log. I got the glitter pens out again for this, and I'm outlining each segment of the pumpkin with the gold glitter pen. I did consider using a few different colours, but in the end I decided that one colour would probably go better for the outline. I'm also kind of using it as gold highlights, adding in some texture to the pumpkin skin, and then I got a white pen as well to get some real highlights. It just needed something to get a little bit of shine on that pumpkin flesh and a bit on the log, taking off the tape, and here's my finished autumn painting with a lovely multicoloured pumpkin. Here's a closer look at it, so you can see some of the gold outline as well. I'm really glad I added a little bit of blue into it. It just kind of breaks it up from being one orange colour, and it just looks more interesting. There's some of the glitter showing through there, as with the autumn triad. I really like this autumn colour palette too. Onwards to forest. For this picture, I'm going to be painting sunbeams through a forest. I really struggled to come up with a picture for forest, and I saw this photo on the Facebook page, which is where I got the sunbeam idea. Mine is very loosely based off this, but then I just basically made the rest of it up as I went along. I painted in a light background, and once that had fully dried, I'm now painting in some very shadowy trees that are meant to go off into the distance. So the lighter the trees, the further away they seem. Mine were kind of floating in space, so I'm adding in a bit more ground there, starting to drop in brighter colour for the foreground, and just mixing in greens and that pretty red colour, which I really like, adding in some subtle hints of foliage, and just slowly building up the colour so that the darker things are, the closer they become to your eye in the foreground. You can see I'm painting in some darker tree trunks and stumps now, just to make them look like they're more in focus, and then it pushes those lighter ones back into the distance. And I'll be perfectly honest, I really had no idea what I was doing. I was just making this up completely as I went along, just going from my previous knowledge of foregrounds and backgrounds and trying to apply it into this painting. I made a bit of a mess here and there, but that's okay, because then you just add another layer, and then the messy bits like the overflowing paint just kind of blend into the background and make it look more natural. I was really trying to preserve that sunbeam, and so I'm painting gold foliage in that area and then green for the rest of it that's not in that sunlight, to give the impression that the gold foliage is far back into the distance and then the sunbeam is in front of it, which is why everything's looking gold. Basically the watercolour version of smoke and mirrors. I kept adding layers of paint, building up detail until I was happy with it. And this is a good time to remind everyone that with watercolours, the more layers you add, the darker the paint becomes. So if you're trying to preserve light areas, try not to overpaint it too much, and then it will stay nice and light. This is easier said than done. I usually overdo it. Now I'm adding in a lot more detail in the foliage, bringing all of that forward to push the lighter foliage back, and I think it's starting to come together at this point. This forest set had some fantastic colours in, and I especially enjoyed painting in those little leaves and going into the gold area here. I think it's looking quite effective, and I just did a small amount of the darker gold rather than covering the entire area. It was hard to know where to stop on this one. I just kept adding in brush strokes to create more grass and leaves and bushes. I was in the painting zone and I was just really enjoying myself. Eventually I peeled the tape off, and just to finish this off, I'm adding in a little bit of gold glitter pen to make the appearance of falling leaves within the sunbeam, and also a little bit of green glitter up the top just to kind of blend it in and make it look a bit more natural. Yeah, because glitter's totally natural. But I just had such a great time, and of course I couldn't help myself. It ended up in other parts of the picture too, but mostly in the central area to make it look like light glinting off things. And what started off being a difficult subject ended up being this lovely painting. I really like this one. It can be quite a challenge to capture light in a watercolour painting, but I think I did pretty well today, and I so need to do more paintings like this because it was so much fun painting in that sunbeam. I really like the gold glitter pen and the other glitter pens as well. It adds a bit of whimsy to my magical forest. It could possibly do with something in the foreground, but I'm leaving well enough alone because I'm happy with it as it is and I really don't want to ruin it. I have one more themed set, and that is landscape, which was also quite a challenge. The colour palette for landscape is a bit more unusual than I was expecting, as shown in the swatches earlier on, but I actually had an idea straight away from the colours. I took this photo at the Tesla Kabloom Festival in autumn here. I was going to use it for the essential palette, but actually the landscape palette really matched this particular picture. Just the colours from the flowers and the background I thought were going to be perfect. And here's me trying to draw in the Ferris wheel. I'd used the washi tape as a circle template, and once I'd penciled everything in lightly, the first thing I wanted to do was paint in the blue sky. Once that was fully dry, I could turn my attention to the details, starting off with the most distant part of the background, and then I'll work my way forward. Mine is a lot less detailed than the photo because I wasn't trying to go for photorealism here, but I was using all of the greens and teals in the set to get this background in, the grass, the trees, and the hills. And I knew the most difficult part of this was going to be the flower beds. So actually I'm making this completely unrealistic. What I'm doing here is just painting in the colours. So it's going to be like a rainbow in the middle of the painting rather than it being specific little flowers, because they would have been a nightmare to paint, and I wasn't really sure how to go about that because there's just so much detail in them. So instead of worrying about that, I'm just painting in the colour scheme, although that blue should actually be white in the photo, but I decided I was going to have blue in mine because I thought it would look prettier. So it's basically like a big rainbow in the middle of this field, and I was thinking it's not looking quite how I want it to, but I'll peel the tape off the back. I accidentally squished the washi tape and so my circle was not circular. That was so annoying, and I drew this in with a black pen, but I was just not liking it at all. It's too dominant in the background, so I got the trusty silver pen and I'm just going to go over all of it. I'm really glad I did this because it looks fantastic. I was able to fix up all of my little mistakes here, and it just looks more natural with that background rather than standing out completely. Then I'm going in with the silver again to add outlines on each of these waves of colour, and then I was thinking, what else can I do with this? And I just decided to draw in these little flowers with matching glitter pens. So I'm using a red glitter for the red lines, and then I'll go in with other colours. Whimsy is definitely the overall theme for this particular video because it was just the kind of mood I was in. I didn't want to do anything too serious or realistic. I was just having fun with the paint palettes and coming up with interesting ideas. I feel like so far Bectober has been really successful. It pulled me out of a creative funk that I was in. I was really struggling around September or so. All of these themes really gave me something to focus on, and it just allowed all the ideas to start flowing again, even if some are not as successful as others. I've had a really great time with this book, and I've made so much art, more than I've made in quite a long time, just all in one go. I also didn't feel anywhere near as much pressure as I would have done with something like Inktober, I think, just to add to the whimsy I'm drawing in some of the flowers in the background. And this turned out completely unexpected, but I really like it as well. I like that I know that it's from the Kabloom Festival, but it's also just something that I made up as well, and I just think it's really fun, an imagination piece based off a realistic place in time. And who doesn't love shiny glitter on a page? That just makes me so happy. Would Would you believe I only had one page side left in this book, so I thought I would just do something with all of the paint palettes and just chuck paint on here. My original idea was to paint fireworks, but as soon as I started doing this, I was looking at it going, that's not going to end up as a firework, I don't think, although the paints did spread quite nicely because I'd added a lot of water to the paper before I started doing this. I think at this point I was hoping they would still be fireworks, but I was getting more and more dubious as the paints just kind of went everywhere, and I was thinking, how am I going to make it look like that? Once it had dried and I started drawing on fireworks with the glitter pen, I realised very quickly it didn't look anything like I had in my head, so I'm just going to keep going with this idea and I'm going to turn it into something else as I go. I coloured in the central parts and they were just making me think more of underwater creatures, maybe like jellyfish or sea anemones, but whatever they're going to be, it's just entirely made up, and I kept going with this idea. I forgot to colour in a couple of the central parts until later on, but you'll see me coming back to those when I eventually see them again. This is just a very abstract piece of art. It's not really meant to be anything. It can be interpreted in any way you like, I guess. I also see umbrellas in this. Let me know if you have any other interpretations. I'd love to know what you see. I'm going back to fill in a few details, and I felt like I needed to outline the edges with the glitter pens too, which is why I've got the ruler out. This is where I spotted that empty gold area and coloured it in with a circle, and then I will see the pink one in a little while. I felt like it just needed something else, so I'm colouring in the empty patches around the blobs in with a black pen to make them really stand out from the background. I wasn't sure if this was a good idea or not, but it is what it is, and it's too late to go back now, so I just kept going. Sometimes when you commit to something, you just have to see it all the way through. This Clairefontaine sketchbook has been really great. It doesn't have too many pages, so I was able to get through this one really quickly, and it was such a joy to use. The cotton paper is lovely. I'll link it in the description below because it's on Amazon, easy to find. And I highly recommend it. I will probably get more of them because I just really like them. I'm finishing the border off with silver pen on the black parts there, and because I couldn't help myself, I also added in some silver dots to break up the black a bit. And here is what the finished picture looks like. I'm calling this one a bit of everything. Maybe they could be loosely interpreted as fireworks, and I'm literally just now seeing that left yellow bit is supposed to be black as well. Oh my gosh, oh well, I'll go back and do that later. This is not what I planned to do, but it's colourful and it's got glitter, so I'm happy. This was a lot of fun to do as well. Now I'll flip through all of the paintings I did today. Flipping to the first page spread, I have all of the swatches on the left-hand side and my first essential painting on the right-hand side. I like having the swatches in the book so I can refer back to them at a later point. Then we have the floral and autumn paintings, and they do kind of match each other in that I've used glitter pen on both of these. And then I come to the next page spread, which is forest and landscape. These ones look very different from each other, but I really like both of these as well. I like everything that I've painted today. I have nothing negative to say about my own painting skills today, yay! Except maybe this one, but even this one turned out really fun and I like it a lot. But I'm not quite done in this book. There is this cardboard page and I really want to do something with that. I will do in my next video. I also have one more piece of watercolour paper, which is the back page of the book. I completely forgot to cover the back of the book, so I've got to do that as well. It's not quite done yet. And look at the absolute state of my desk. I know I've had a good painting session when my desk gets as messy as this. I needed to wrangle all of this together before I finish this video up. It's really satisfying looking at messy paint tins, and you can see here that I have used every single colour in all 5 sets. They're fun palettes. I reckon these would be handy for travelling as well. You could keep them all in the one blue box, or just take 1 or 2 palettes with you. After a tidy up, that's everything I have for today. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. I'd love to know which is your favourite painting, and what would you have painted with these? I'm so excited, the book's almost finished. I've just got that last little bit to do. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up. Don't forget to like and hype, and don't forget to subscribe as well. I'll link up the previous Grabie gift box and a previous Bectober video for you to watch. I hope you're having a lovely day, and I'll see you in my next video. Swatch you later. Bye!